Key,
Hello.
what are you still crazy after?
I'm still crazy after all this beer.
I'm still crazy after all these beers also. You love the show, don't you?
I love so.
Have you ever seen it?
No.
Let's start the show.
Still Crazy After All These Beers is brought to you by our friends at Michelob, crafting a better beer. And Porta Pong, the world's #1 best-selling inflatable beer pong table at portapong.com.
Hey, welcome everyone to Philadelphia and Still Crazy After All These Beers. I'm here with my friend Marnie Old. Hi, Marnie. How are you? Ooh, that's not bad at all. I like that. Now, Marnie, you're one of the premier, I would say wine people in the country, but you've really expanded your palate. Can we use that? Can we say that? Sure. Into the sakes, the beers, the whole thing. And right now we're really interested in sake.
Well, that's because we're here at Sake Fest 2010, which is the 6th annual event of this kind that's affiliated with Philadelphia's Cherry Blossom Festival. It happens every April, and it's a blast.
And the weather's gorgeous, so we're having a great time here in Philadelphia. And you know what? Some of my beer people, and you probably hear this, are getting into sake now. Is that a crossover from beer to sake and wine to sake? I mean, are we seeing, is it reaching all segments?
I've been saying for years that Americans have this perception that beer is one thing and that wine and spirits is another. But in reality, all of the low-alcohol fermented products, whether it's beer, whether it's wine, whether it's sake or cider, share some important criteria that make them interesting to those who are interested in food and flavor. And that is that their distinctiveness, their complexity and nuance comes from fermentation, whereas spirits are something else. Spirits are a low-alcohol beverage that is then distilled and refined, and oftentimes those flavors are stripped away in the distillation process. So to me, being into wine is the same as being into beer and cider and sake. They are all kissing cousins and very closely related.
You know, I'm so happy to hear you say that. It's not one against another. Why can't good beverages can't we all just get along out there?
Of course. And I think it's so silly to try and think of them as being, competitors in any way. It's like restaurants. If there are 3 great restaurants on one block, people come to that block to enjoy, and they don't know which place they're going to go. They end up patronizing all of them. And same thing is true with restaurant patrons. You don't eat in the same place every night. You also don't drink the same thing every night. Absolutely. So there's no reason we can't share a little bit of our audience with some of these other products.
Now, I want to ask you, when I was first exposed to sake, which was about 10 years ago, I'd never had sake prior to that time. I was sent to New York to cover the World Sake Summit.
Ooh.
Yeah, 50 best sakes of the world. You need a frame of reference. If someone gives you the best of something, you need to know the worst of something, so you have a frame of reference. And I actually fell in love with the beverage and learned some things. For example, it's sulfite-free, so you may not get a sour stomach from it. And I really fell in love with sake. Now, the alcohol content is a bit elevated. We're into, the 14, 15, 16%?
On average, the sakes that we see the most frequently tend to range from 15 to 20% alcohol, which is higher than most wine or beer drinkers are used to. Mm-hmm. But let's remember that the portion is also significantly smaller.
Absolutely.
So there's really a similar amount of alcohol intake per hour when you're sipping sake along with your meal as compared to sipping a beer, which would come in a much larger portion size, and that we tend to take larger sips.
Do Americans know good sake?
No, not yet, but we're doing our best to change that. The reality is that you don't need a 4-year degree to know what tastes good to you. And most people, when they taste premium sake for the first time, find it to be an eye-opening experience, because so many Americans, I hear it at Sake Fest every year, associate sake with that, they call it jet fuel that they serve in sushi restaurants. And of course, that's relatively modestly priced, usually American-made sake that is served at a very high temperature, in part, I have to confess, to mask its flavors. In the same way that a ice-cold mug of Silver Bullet Coors Light tastes better than if you let it come to a standard drinking temperature where you start noticing its flaws, that's exactly what's going on with heating low-grade sake to try and make it seem more palatable.
Mm-hmm. Boy, I was sweating out the brand of the beer. I don't know about you guys, but that was a very good choice, by the way. I got to tell you that. And another question, you kind of addressed this. Chilled or warmed?
Well, in general, there's almost never a style of premium sake that you would actually serve hot. But in Japan, premium sakes can range in service temperature both through recommendation and food pairing, but also personal preference. And the range in Japan never goes hot. It's the warmest is what they call skin temperature. There are some that you would serve at room temperature, and yet others that you would serve chilled, like we would grab a beer out of the fridge.
And I guess part of the complexity is based on the degree of milling of the rice.
It's absolutely true that this is one of the quality factors, in the same way that a craft brew enthusiast might understand the idea of using all malt in brewing as opposed to the addition of adjunct grains that can dilute the flavor of the beer. Something similar is done with sake, where the grain of rice is polished down, and to achieve the specialty categories of premium sake, you must remove at least 30% of the exterior of the grain of rice to get to the purer starch at the core. And with the very finest sakes, they often continue to polish further down to that little nub of starch, taking away as much of, or sometimes even more than half of the grain as they go.
Now, Marnie, this is just a wealth of information. Can we get you to come back next week with us, do another segment?
Sure, no trouble at all. I'd be glad to join you.
Final Gravity's out there. Listen to them, guys. They're our house band, and we'll see you next time on Still Crazy.